Hey beauties and beasts, it's Megan back again, and you know what that means. It's story time. And tonight we're diving deep into a haunted mansion tale, so get comfy, grab your skincare, your favorite drink, maybe some late night snacks, and let's begin our little midnight self-care session with a touch of horror. Okay, so imagine you're walking through downtown Beijing. Skyscrapers everywhere, neon lights, millions of people rushing past you. And then you see something. This crumbling Western-style mansion just sitting there like it doesn't belong, like it's from a completely different world. They call it Chaonei No. 81, and it's known as the most haunted building in all of China. But every city has its spooky house, right? The place teenagers dare each other to visit. But this one's different, because this building sits on some of the most expensive real estate in Beijing. So now we're talking millions upon millions of dollars. But over 50 years, this mansion sat empty, rotting and abandoned, and nobody could explain why. So, you ready? This is the story of Chaonei No. 81. In the Dongcheng district of Beijing, on a street called Chaoyangmen Inner Avenue, there's an address that locals have whispered about for decades, No. 81. It sits in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in all of China, surrounded by gleaming skyscrapers, luxury apartments, and the headquarters of massive corporations. Land here is worth millions. Every square foot is precious, and yet, for over 50 years, this one building sat abandoned. And while the city around it transformed into a modern metropolis, this French Baroque mansion from the 1920s just stayed, like a wound that wouldn't heal, like something the city couldn't digest. The locals call it Chaonei No. 81, but they have other names for it too. The Murder House, the Place of Weeping, Beijing's most haunted building. Walk past it during the day and you might think it's just another old building waiting for renovation. The facade has been cleaned up. Security guards stand at the gate. There are signs saying it's private property. But ask anyone who grew up in the neighborhood, and they will tell you a different story. They will tell you about the nights when you can hear crying from inside, about the figure that appears in the second floor window during storms, about the people who went in and never came out. They will tell you that no amount of renovation, no number of security guards, no official explanation will change what that building really is. The place where something went terribly wrong, and whatever happened there, it's still happening. Urban explorers who've snuck inside tell stories that will actually make your skin crawl. They talk about footsteps echoing through empty hallways. Multiple groups have reported being shoved from behind in the darkness. I mean hard enough to send them stumbling forward. They spin around, flashlights swinging wildly, and there's nothing there. Nobody. Just empty corridors stretching back into the shadows. Now, you can dismiss that as overactive imagination, people getting spooked in a dark, abandoned building, which is reasonable. But then I came across an interesting post that made me reconsider. The details can't be fully verified, of course, but it was posted on a Chinese urban exploration forum in late 2015. And the specifics are too consistent with other reports to ignore. A user named Chaonei posted about what happened when he and 3 friends entered Chaonei No. 81 around 11 p.m. on Saturday night. So according to his account, they'd been planning it for weeks. After the 2014 movie, visiting the haunted mansion had become a rite of passage for urban explorers in Beijing. So 4 of them, Chaonei, Zhang, Lili, and her boyfriend Kun, waited until the security guards made his rounds, then slipped through a gap in the fence on the east side. The courtyard was overgrown, vines everywhere, broken glass crunching under their feet. And the west building looked worse than the photos online. Windows completely gone, walls stained black with mold. But they were excited. They were laughing, taking photos, and acting brave. They entered the west building first. The door was already open, hanging off one hinge. Inside, it was completely dark. Their flashlights only seemed to make it worse, like the darkness was pushing back against the light. And the air smelled kind of weird. Not just mildew or rot. It was something else, something sweet and sick. They were exploring the first floor when Lily grabbed Chaonei's arm. "Did you hear that?" And they all stopped, listened, and they heard footsteps above them on the second floor. And the footsteps sounded a little weird because it was slow. It sounded deliberate. Slow steps walking from one end of the building to the other. And Zhang laughed it off, probably just another explorer. But his voice was shaky. They found the staircase to the second floor. The steps were rotted through in places, so they had to be careful. And when they reached the top, the footsteps had stopped. The second floor hallway stretched out in front of them. Doors on both sides, most of them closed. And their flashlights swept across peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. And that is when Chaonei noticed something strange. He could hear 5 sets of footsteps, but there were only 4 of them. He suddenly stopped. Everyone else stopped too. But the 5th set of footsteps continued for 2 more steps before stopping. "Who else is here?" Kun's voice was barely a whisper. Nobody answered, but they could all hear it now. Someone or something was in that hallway with them. Lily wanted to leave immediately, but Zhang, trying to be brave, insisted they check the rooms first. "We came all this way, right?" So they started opening doors. Most of the rooms were empty. Trash, broken furniture, graffiti on the walls. Normal abandoned building stuff. Then they reached the room at the end of the hall. The door was closed, but not locked. Zhang pushed it open, and the smell hit them first. That same sweet, sick smell from downstairs, but 10 times stronger. It was so intense, Chaonei had to cover his mouth. The room was dark, completely dark, even with their flashlights pointed inside. It was like the light couldn't penetrate past the doorway. And in the back corner of the room, they could see something, a shape, human-sized, just standing there in the darkness. Not moving, not making a sound, just standing. And Zhang called out, "Hey, someone's there?" The shape didn't respond. It didn't move. Lily was pulling at Chaonei's arm. We need to go, now." But he couldn't look away, because as his eyes adjusted, he could see more details. It was a woman, or the silhouette of a woman, wearing what looked like old-fashioned clothing. Her head was tilted at a weird angle, and her face, he couldn't see her face. Her hair was covering it, long, black hair hanging down. "Let's go," Kun said. His voice was tight with fear. They backed away from the doorway and they started heading for the stairs. And that is when they heard it. Crying. Soft at first, then getting louder. A woman crying, not sad crying. This was different. This was a sound of someone in absolute despair. Like all the grief in the world was pouring out of her. And it was coming from that room. They ran, but when they reached the staircase, Lily was in front. Chaonei watched her put her foot on the first step, and then she screamed. Someone pushed her from behind, hard, and he saw it happen. She was flying forward, crashing down the stairs, tumbling. Chaonei spun around to see who pushed her, and there was nobody there, just empty hallway, and at the far end, that door they'd opened. It was still open, And in the darkness beyond it, he could see that shape, that woman. And she was closer now. She moved. She was standing in the doorway. They got Lily up. She'd sprained her ankle badly, but could still walk. And they ran together. They didn't stop running until they were 3 blocks away. The next day, Lily went to the hospital. Sprained ankle, some bruising. The doctor asked her how it happened. She told him she just fell down some stairs. She didn't tell him where. According to Chaonei, none of them told anyone where, because who would believe them? But he wrote the post, he said, because people needed to understand something. That building was not empty. There was something in that house, something on the 2nd floor, in that room at the end of the hall. And it wasn't friendly. They all saw it. They all heard the crying. And Lily was pushed by something that wasn't there. Chaonei claimed he'd explored dozens of abandoned buildings in Bejing. He'd never felt fear like that before. It was primal fear. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to run. His warning was clear. Don't go to Chaonei 81. Whatever's in there doesn't want visitors. And if someone does go, whatever they do, don't open the door at the end of the 2nd floor hallway. The post ended there. A few people replied asking for more details, asking which building he meant, east or west. Chaonei never responded again. His account went silent. No one knows what happened to him afterwards. Even during the day when sunlight pours through those tall, arched openings, people walking by swear they see shadows moving inside. Not just any shadows, human-shaped ones. They drift past the windows like they're watching the street below. And at night, during storms, residents in the surrounding buildings report seeing a figure standing at the 2nd floor window. Just standing there, completely still, staring out into the rain. The building is supposed to be empty. Then there's the sound. On certain nights, people passing by the gates hear weeping, a woman crying, her sobs echoing from somewhere deep inside that mansion. The sound is so heartbreaking, so filled with despair that it stops people in their tracks. Are these stories true? Exaggerated, complete fabrications? We don't know. But one local woman told the New York Times something that's documented, verified, and absolutely chilling. She said, even in the 1970s, we knew the house was haunted. As children, we would play hide and seek nearby, but we didn't dare come in alone. Never. Even the Red Guards who briefly occupied the building during the Cultural Revolution got so frightened they abandoned it. And think about that. Revolutionary zealots during one of the most chaotic periods in Chinese history, people who weren't supposed to fear anything, fled that house in the middle of the night. What would scare them that badly? Now here's the story that everyone tells about Chaonei No. 81. The one that became so famous, they made a blockbuster horror movie about it. During the Chinese War in 1949, a high-ranking nationalist officer was hiding in the mansion with his family. But he wasn't just hiding his wife and children there. He'd also been keeping mistresses in secret, and one of them was pregnant. When the communists closed in on Beijing, the officer made a choice. He decided to flee to Taiwan with his legitimate family and leave his mistresses behind. And that was a death sentence. The communists were executing anyone associated with nationalist officials. According to one legend, one of these women, heavy with child, begged him to take her, to save their baby. But he refused. Days later, they found her body hanging from the rafters on the 2nd floor, a rope around her neck, her swollen belly visible beneath her dress. They say she died in absolute despair, and that kind of death, betrayal, abandonment, the murder of an unborn child, it leaves a mark, a stain that won't wash away. From that moment on, the mansion became cursed. A woman's spirit, consumed by rage and grief, refused to leave. She wanders the halls, weeping for the child she never got to hold. And anyone who enters her domain, well, they might never come back out. Tragic, terrifying, and it explains everything. The crying sounds, the figure in the window, why the building feels so wrong. But there's just one problem. Official records say it never happened. According to the official records from the Bejing Catholic Diocese and the Chinese Patriotic Catholic Association, there is no evidence that any Kuomintang officer ever lived in that building. They've checked the historical documents from that period, and there was nothing. The pregnant mistress, the betrayal, her death, it's folklore. An urban legend, a ghost story that got repeated so many times people started believing it was real. So that's it, right? Case closed. Just another spooky tale that turned out to be fiction. Except it's not that simple. Because while that specific story might be fake, the building's history is very real. When you dig into what actually happened there, it gets a lot more disturbing. The mansion was built in 1921 as a private home for a French railway engineer named Georges Bouillard and his wife, Zhu Darong. They lived there together until Bouillard died in 1930, and after that, Zhu Darong lived there alone. Eventually, she had to rent out parts of the house, the ground floor to Catholic nuns, other rooms to the church for an infirmary and dormitory. In 1948, she sold the property to an Irish Catholic priest, but she was allowed to keep living on the ground floor because she was elderly and had nowhere else to go. Then came 1949, the communist takeover. Foreign missionaries were kicked out in 1951. The government seized the building and used it for various offices through the 1950s and early 60s. And standard stuff, nothing supernatural about any of that. But here is when it gets weird. So even though she wasn't supposed to be there anymore, Zhu Darong, now very old and frail, she refused to leave. She stayed in that house, living on the ground floor, because she was too old to even move. And then in the mid-1960s, she just disappeared. No body was ever found, no death certificate, no grave with her name on it anywhere in Beijing. She just vanished. Around the same time, during the Cultural Revolution, a group of Red Guards briefly occupied the building. Young revolutionaries, fearless and fanatical. And they left in the middle of the night. According to local residents, they were frightened by something. And after that, the building sat empty for decades. Nobody would use it. Nobody would buy it. It just rotted there in the heart of one of the most expensive neighborhoods in China. Now, the official explanation is bureaucratic limbo, property disputes, incomplete records. The Catholic Church finally got it back in 1994, but couldn't afford to renovate it due to strict historic preservation laws. And that all makes sense on paper, but it doesn't explain everything. Why did the Red Guards flee? These were people who destroyed temples, burned books, beat their own teachers in the streets. They weren't afraid of anything. So what happened in that house that night? What happened to Zhu Darong? How does an elderly woman just disappear without a trace? Even during the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, people just don't evaporate. And why, for over 50 years, did that building remain abandoned on prime real estate worth millions? Beijing has demolished countless historic buildings for development, yet this one stayed, like the city itself was afraid to touch it. In the decades after it was abandoned, there were multiple attempts to tear the building down and renovate it, and every single one ended in disaster. Workers reported equipment malfunctions, tools breaking, machinery that would suddenly explode with no mechanical explanation. One worker was operating a demolition vehicle when it erupted in flames. He survived but was badly injured, and he refused to ever return to the site. Another crew was inside taking measurements when one of the workers started screaming and convulsing. His colleagues got him outside, called for help, but by the time the ambulance arrived, he was dead. The doctors couldn't find a cause. His heart just stopped for no reason. But the story that really terrified people involved a worker who vanished. He'd been outside smoking with his buddies, finished his cigarette, then said he was going to check something inside. He walked through the doorway, and that was the last time anyone saw him. His friends waited a few minutes, then went looking. They searched every room, every hallway, every corner of the building. They called his name, and nothing. He was just gone. And after that, workers refused to set foot on that property. You would offer triple wages, quadruple wages, didn't matter. Nobody would do it. And just like that, the building sat untouched for decades. In a city obsessed with development, that mansion remained, like something was protecting it, or like something inside wouldn't let it be destroyed. Fast forward to 2014, and everything exploded. A Chinese horror film called The House That Never Dies hit theaters, based on the legend of Chaonei No.81 and the pregnant mistress story. It became a massive hit, broke box office records, earned over $64 million. And suddenly, everyone in China knew about that haunted mansion in downtown Beijing. After the film's release, up to 500 people a day were showing up at the gates. Urban explorers, thrill seekers, paranormal investigators. The Catholic diocese had to lock everything down and only let a few people in at a time because the building was structurally unsafe. Warning signs went up everywhere. Entry forbidden. This place is dangerous. Enter at your own risk. And that only made people more curious. Kids would sneak in at night. Some would come out pale and shaking. A few were crying. When people asked what they'd seen, most wouldn't talk about it. They'd just shake their heads and leave. The one who did talk described the same things over and over. Footsteps and empty corridors being pushed by invisible hands. The overwhelming feeling of being watched. And that basement, people said the basement felt wrong in a way they couldn't explain. In 2016, the government finally decided to do something about it. They launched a major renovation project to restore the building and erase its haunted reputation once and for all. The work began in March, and almost immediately rumors started spreading. Workers reported tools going missing, equipment malfunctioning, hearing things, seeing things, feeling things they couldn't explain. And then came the deaths. According to local rumors, 3 construction workers died in mysterious accidents during the renovation. One report even claimed that half the money budgeted for construction materials mysteriously disappeared, just vanished from the accounts, never found. In 2017, the renovation was complete. Chaonei No.81 was transformed into a gleaming modern building. The Catholic diocese listed it for rent at 10 million yuan per year, which is over 1.6 million US dollars. For prime real estate in central Beijing, companies should have been lining up. But the response was ice cold. I'd rather buy a building than rent that one. Who wants to work where ghosts still walk around? The rent dropped and dropped and dropped. Finally, an unnamed tenant agreed to take it. The diocese won't say who they are or what they're using it for. That information is kept private, but security guards are there 24/7 now, turning people away. This isn't a tourist attraction, they tell visitors. This is a normal office building. normal, except people still report seeing shadows in the windows. Security guards say 20 to 30 people still show up every day, some trying to sneak in at 1 in the morning. And on certain nights, passersby still hear it, the sound of a woman weeping. So here we are, over 100 years after Chaonei No. 81 was built, and we still don't have answers. The pregnant mistress story, that's been debunked. It never happened. But something did happen in that house. Multiple somethings. An elderly woman vanished without a trace. Revolutionary soldiers fled in terror. Workers died or disappeared during demolition attempts. Construction crews during renovation reported the same strange experiences that urban explorers described decades earlier. You can renovate a building. You can tear out the walls, replace the floors, paint over the graffiti, put up security cameras. But can you renovate away whatever really happened there? I don't think the pregnant mistress is haunting Chaonei No. 81. I think something else is there. Something that was there before the legends, before the movies, before the ghost stories. Something that's been there since the very beginning. Maybe it's Zhu Derong herself, the widow who refused to leave her home even when everyone else was forced out. Maybe she's still there, in the only place she ever felt safe. Or maybe she was also taken by some unknown being or led to some unknown space within that building. Or maybe there's something about that land, that specific spot in Bejing, that's always been wrong. And the mansion was just built on top of it. So if you ever find yourself in Bejing, you can walk right past Chaonei No. 81. It's at 81 Chaoyangmen Inner Street in the Dongcheng district. The building looks normal now. It looks professional, clean, renovated. During the day, it could be any other office building. But if you go at night, stand outside those gates for a few minutes, just listen. People say that on certain nights, especially when the moon is full, you can still hear it. A woman crying, soft and heartbroken, like she's mourning something that can never be replaced. Okay, that's a wrap for today. Sleep well, guys, and see you soon. Bye-bye.